In your position as a manager here at Lowe's, you encounter a variety of issues every day on the job. Some you have to deal with on a regular basis, while others might crop up a little less often. But one thing is certain, they all require your attention to make sure things run smoothly. One subject you need to be able to discuss with confidence is one that you might not really know much about, and that topic is labor unions. Dealing with unions in the workplace can be a tricky subject, especially if you've never been involved in a union organizing drive or been in a unionized environment. And because you'll find that employees often think they know more about unions than they really do, it's vital that you understand Lowe's position on unions and how unions might affect both employees' jobs and yours. As a manager, you need to know how to talk to employees about unions. You need to be comfortable if and when it comes up and not get nervous or anxious about what to do. Unions are nothing to be scared of, and the more you know about them, the more comfortable you'll be in dealing with them. But you also need to know that there are certain do's and don'ts you must go by to make sure things are done correctly. This training program is designed to give you the foundation and information you'll need to handle the subject of labor unions in your workplace. Any union activity must be reported at the very earliest sign, no matter how trivial it might seem at the time. Don't hesitate to call our labor hotline and then immediately notify your district manager, the Regional Human Resources Office, and corporate headquarters. Make sure you can give them as much information as possible, including the source of your information and when you got it, specific details about the nature of the activity, any particular dates you heard that things might happen, such as union meetings, the union involved, the reason for any activity, and how many employees might be involved. Obviously, the first thing you should know is, what exactly is a union? Well, first of all, it's an organization that is usually elected by a majority of employees. It becomes the legally authorized and exclusive representative of all employees in a particular bargaining unit to negotiate with the company in dealing with wages, benefits, and working conditions. Now, to put it in basic terms, Lowe's strongly opposes unions in our company. Lowe's simply believes that labor unions have nothing better to offer our employees beyond what we already provide. Lowe's is pro-employee, meaning that an environment of open communication between management and employees works best without interference from an outside third party. We feel that employees should have access to management and be able to speak for themselves without having to pay their hard-earned money to a union to represent them. And any suggestion that Lowe's is neutral on the union issue and doesn't really care about unions coming into our locations is just not true. Labor unions have a habit of creating an us versus them mentality, where employees are on one side of the fence and management is on the other. It becomes a very divisive atmosphere with a breakdown in communication and cooperation, making it hard to be efficient and competitive. That's exactly the opposite of what Lowe's wants to establish in our business. Unions today are putting millions of dollars and a renewed effort into organizing and finding new members. And the chances are better than ever that your facility could wind up as the target of a union organizing campaign. You need to be prepared just in case that ever happens. The labor unions of today really have their roots in the late 1800s, when they grew out of the need for basic on-the-job protections for workers in manufacturing industries like steel and textiles. Working conditions were unsafe in many cases, with 6- and 7-day work weeks, and even children as young as 8 working for only pennies a day and no benefits. Congress passed a law in 1935 called the National Labor Relations Act, designed to govern relations between employers and unions. Section 7 of the NLRA states, all employees shall have the right to self-organization, to form, join, or assist labor organizations, to bargain collectively through representatives of their own choosing, and to engage in other concerted activities for the purpose of collective bargaining or other mutual aid or protection. In a nutshell, that means employees have the guaranteed right to support a union in their workplace. However, the NLRA continues and shall also have the right to refrain from any or all of such activities. This is the part that unions like to forget and usually leave out when they are promoting their cause to employees. So the Act makes sure employees have the right to either be for or against unionization. You may not be sure of what exactly the NLRA means when it says employees may engage in other concerted activities. Well, to unravel the legal jargon, it basically refers to any group action by employees that legitimately furthers their common interests in wages, hours, working conditions, and other terms and conditions of employment. Along those lines, certain activities that employees might participate in are protected by the NLRA. It covers things like processing grievances, complaints about unsafe conditions, filing complaints with government agencies, refusing to perform work of a striking employee, or complaints over discriminatory hiring practices. But the NLRA does not give employees the ability to run roughshod over management and claim it as protected activity. You should know that employees are stepping over the line if they engage in gross insubordination, abusive or insulting language, threatening behavior, misconduct during a union strike, or are voluntarily terminated. If these types of incidents occur, management should follow customary policies and procedures in terms of discipline and discharge. In conjunction with the NLRA, Congress also created the National Labor Relations Board, the government agency that oversees union elections, collective bargaining, and any unlawful acts that unions or employers might commit. After the passage of the NLRA, union growth really took off. In 1937, unions won an amazing 97% of the elections they were involved in. And in 1945, union representation reached its all-time high point when 35% of the American workforce belonged to some union. It was definitely a great time for unions. But that was then, and this is now. Odds are that most employees don't realize how much union membership figures have plunged in the last 50 years. They'd probably be very surprised if you told them that today, unions represent less than 9% of the private sector workforce. That means that not even 1 in 10 workers carry a union card. There are many reasons why unions have lost so much clout and members over the years. As worldwide competition increased, many companies had to shut down or make adjustments in order to survive, especially in manufacturing, where unions traditionally had more strength. With a growing focus and concern for worker safety, the government has created many laws and agencies, such as OSHA, to watch over industry and the workplace. Today, corporations have become more employee-focused and offer benefits to employees that weren't available just a few years ago. The bottom line is that employees don't see the need for unions that they used to and have turned their backs on organized labor. But this massive drop in numbers has translated into a huge loss of income because unions make most of their money from dues collected from members. The math is simple. Fewer union members equals fewer union dues. No matter how they might portray themselves, unions are a business, and they have large staffs and expenses they must pay for in order to run. This means they're looking for new people to replace all that lost income. And what better place to find potential members than a large home improvement company located all across the country with lots of employees capable of paying dues every month to a union. That's where you as a manager come in. In this program, we're going to follow some Lowe's managers who find themselves caught up in a typical union campaign. This will help you get a better idea of the situations you might find yourself in and how to handle them. You might be wondering what you would be up against if a union decided to go after your location. Well, unions today are very good at communicating their message to potential members. They have huge staffs of paid professional business agents and organizers whose only task in life is to get your employees to sign up with them. Keep in mind that you are dealing with people who organize day in and day out. This is all they do. They've probably been to a specialized organizing school to sharpen their skills. Unions today even offer summer internships to college students to teach them the inside aspects of labor in the workplace. Organizers may have worked on literally hundreds of union campaigns, dealing with thousands of employees. So anything you come up with, they've no doubt seen and heard and have a ready response for it. Unions today are much better at getting across their message to employees. Organizers are younger and more educated than in the past, and are in tune with the concerns workers have. They do an excellent job of listening to what employees have to say. Whatever problem an employee has, the organizer's job is to point out that the union has a solution. The organizer comes armed with detailed knowledge about Lowe's and your specific operation. They have researched using the internet, news articles, competitors, and even your own employees. Don't go into a union campaign unarmed. You should also find out as much as you can about the specific union that has targeted your location. There's a wealth of information to be found about labor unions, including their own websites that give you clues as to their tactics and tendencies. Although there's a lot involved in a union getting into a company, the overall process the union goes through is fairly simple. First, organizers try to persuade your employees that they would be better off with the union representing them. The next step is to have employees sign union authorization cards. And if enough employees sign cards, the union can get an election scheduled with the NLRB. If the union gets a majority of the votes cast, they're in as the employee's representative, and they can attempt to negotiate a contract with the company. The holy grail to an organizer is a signed union authorization card. It basically is a legal document that says the employee is giving the union the right to speak for them in terms of wages, benefits, and working conditions. It's like giving the union power of attorney and lets them make binding agreements that employees must live by. If at least 30% of the employees sign those cards, the union can take them to the NLRB and petition for an election. However, most unions will wait until they have at least 50% signed up, and usually closer to 60 to 70%, because they know that many of those people will shift sides during the ongoing campaign. It also makes the union appear to be much stronger than it really might be, and makes employees think they'd better get on board if they don't want to be left out. There are also some instances where unions can get in a company using authorization cards without an election. This sometimes happens in companies that may already have some unionized facilities. Management will sign a neutrality clause in the union contract in order to avoid a bigger labor issue like a strike. This clause gives the union the right to go to a different location and do what is called a card check, where the union gets cards signed without the company fighting it. If they get a majority of the employees to sign, the union is allowed in without an election. This is actually the way unions prefer to get members, because it's much easier without company interference. However, you can be sure that Lowe's has no intentions of signing a neutrality clause or allowing a card check. Unions use a lot of pressure tactics to get employees to sign cards and will hassle people until they sign just to get the union off their back. Be aware that in many cases, a number of people who sign cards may be unsure of the union and are not to be considered lost causes in your efforts to convince employees they're better off without a union. Make sure you stress to your employees the significance of signing a card. The language on a typical card reads like this: I, the undersigned, authorize Local 100 to represent me as exclusive bargaining agent in all matters pertaining to wages, hours, terms, and conditions of employment. Notice that the card says absolutely nothing about holding an election. While the organizer will tell employees that a card is just a good way to gauge interest in a union, it actually is a binding document that states the employee is really giving the union the exclusive right to speak for the employee. That means they are not allowed to go directly to management anymore. The card also says nothing about guaranteeing higher wages or better benefits. But it does mean the employee might have to pay union dues, fees, and assessments if they become a union member. And becoming a member obligates employees to abide by a new set of union rules and regulations they've set up in their union constitution. So signing a card is a serious step and is not to be taken lightly. Often, a union representative will make a personal appearance and try to get you to accept signed authorization cards as proof they have the support of your employees. Do not, under any circumstances, agree to take or even look at any cards they might offer to give you. Tell them they need to refer any such matters to the Vice President of Human Resources at the General Office, and they should contact them instead. You then need to immediately contact the labor hotline, as we mentioned previously. Also, if you receive a letter from the union stating that a majority of your employees have signed authorization cards, and they are requesting you recognize them as the representative of the employees, do not attempt to respond to or answer the letter. Again, call the labor hotline to find out what to do with the letter. Once a union has identified your location as a target, the professional organizers will recruit some of your employees as inside union organizers or pushers. They will go to great lengths to find Lowe's employees willing to sell the union to their coworkers. Or in some cases, called salting, The union will even have their own organizers who are on the union payroll actually apply for jobs at Lowe's to be able to work from the inside. While they sometimes will state right up front during the interview that they are with the union, often they will not say anything at all, meaning you won't know their true allegiance. The courts have ruled that it is illegal for an employer to discriminate in hiring based on an applicant's union status or history. This means that it's very important to use proper techniques when interviewing and make sure you hire the right people to avoid giving a union easy access. And in some Lowe stores, unions may have a foothold now, as some Nations Rent employees are already unionized. Those folks are in contact with Lowe's people on a daily basis and may talk about how their union operates and what it has done for them. So be alert that there are a variety of ways that unions can gain access to your employees. These employee organizers will be the eyes and ears of the union, watching everything that goes on and reporting it back to the union. While they tend to stay underground at first while they're getting things started, they will sooner or later identify themselves publicly as a union organizing committee, almost daring you to make a mistake in dealing with them so they have an example of bad management to point out.
Okay, so how's it going with the authorization cards? As the organizing committee, it's your job to get the employees to sign up.
Well, it's going pretty good so far. We've got nearly 30% already. But, you know, I feel like I'm starting to run into a little more resistance.
Yeah, I got all my friends to sign up like you suggested. But now some of them are telling me they're not too sure about this union.
Hey, our union really wants to organize Lowe's. This would be a great start if we could get our foot in the door. And if the union is going to get an election scheduled, we've got to get a lot more cards signed.
Look, everybody's got a problem at work, okay? It's your job to find out exactly what that problem is and then tell them the union is the solution, of course.
Yeah, well, see, the thing is, they're starting to avoid me. I mean, I'm afraid they might be telling management what's going on.
We've got to keep this quiet for right now. I mean, the last thing we need is for your managers to get wind of this. But keep an eye on them and let us know if they give us some ammo that we can use against them.
Right.
These in-house pushers are often workers who might feel they need extra protection from management, or who have already gotten a bad track record. They tend to be marginal workers in many cases, and think the union is a way to increase their own power and influence. They're usually very outspoken and may be extremely anti-management. In some cases, they might have even been in a union in a past job. But the one thing they all have in common is they see the union as the answer to their problems. You should know that one of the first things a union organizer will tell your employees when trying to get into your store is that management is the enemy and can't be trusted. They'll tell employees that anything you say about unions is a lie and that you're not really interested in helping them. Keep this in mind, because the best time to communicate the real facts is before an organizer has the chance to convince them you're out to get them. Once employees have been influenced by an organizer, it makes your job that much harder. One interesting aspect of unions today is that your employees could be approached by almost any union out there. In the past, unions tended to organize workers mainly in their own industry. But today, all bets are off, as unions are scrambling for dues income, meaning almost anyone could show up outside your doors. For example, there are hospital employees represented by the United Mine Workers and university professors covered by the Auto Workers Union. But the most likely unions to target Lowe's are the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, known as the UFCW, and the Teamsters. Both are active in retail operations, and both are very aggressive when it comes to organizing campaigns. You might have heard that the UFCW has been running a very high-profile national campaign against Walmart in recent years, as they see incredible potential in organizing a company with over 1 million employees. The Teamsters were traditionally a union for truck drivers, but they've branched out since the trucking industry has become heavily non-union today. But no matter what union might show up, it's imperative that your employees understand what unions can and cannot do for them, because they will get distorted information from a union. And no matter what employees might be promised by an organizer, the facts are that unions cannot guarantee that they will ever get a union contract, much less one with higher wages, better benefits or working conditions, certain hours, or job security in general. In addition, a union cannot prevent layoffs, closings, or lawful terminations. And unions cannot set job standards, make operational decisions, or select supervisors. But there are a few things unions can do if they win an election and get in your store. And those don't always benefit employees, as unions can collect dues, fees, and assessments from members, negotiate and bargain for everyone, including employees who voted against the union in the election, and go on strike. One aspect of unionization that is very often misunderstood by employees is how collective bargaining works if a union wins an election. What they think that they know probably came from an organizer, and you can bet it's a slanted version of the truth. Make sure you explain what it is and how it works, because it's a huge part of being in a union. Collective bargaining is when the union and the company meet and negotiate in an attempt to reach agreement over such things as wages, benefits, and working conditions. Both parties have an obligation to bargain in good faith, which means they must have the intention of reaching an agreement. However, neither party is compelled to make any concessions or agree to anything that is not in its best interest. What that means for employees is that no matter what an organizer might have promised them, the company does not have to give in to any union demands. It becomes a game of give and take, with both sides usually making deals to get what it wants. In the end, when the ink is dry, employees might find themselves with a better overall package. They might find that they have almost exactly the same things, or, as happens in many cases, they find that they have actually ended up with less than they started with. Be aware that the union may use a half-truth and will tell employees that they can't lose anything just because they vote in a union. On the surface, that is correct. But the distinction is that in bargaining, they can lose, not just because they vote for the union. Point out to employees that the National Labor Relations Board has confirmed that when they ruled collective bargaining is potentially hazardous for employees, and as a result of such negotiations, employees could possibly wind up with less after unionization than before. And employees should realize that in bargaining, it's common for a union to trade away existing benefits in order to get something they want in the contract. The union wants to get clauses like dues checkoff that gives the union the right to deduct union dues and fees directly from an employee's paycheck before they even get it. Or super seniority, which gives the union stewards and officials extra protection in the case of layoffs. And in states that allow it, they will almost always try to get a union security clause that makes it mandatory for employees to join the union or at least pay dues. If they don't, the company may be forced to fire them. And union seniority clauses can mean an employee who has excelled and worked hard to advance may be passed over for someone else just because they haven't been on the job as long. Now that we've seen what bargaining involves and what the union will probably try for, let's take a look at how collective bargaining can play out. In this situation, imagine that the union has won an election at a Lowe store.
Okay, let's get started, shall we? As the legally elected bargaining representative for the employees at Lowe's, we have here a list of demands. Now, you should know that the membership has met, and they are in unanimous agreement of all the items included in here. Now, our first item on the list is dues checkoff. You'll look at the bottom of page 2. You can initial right there, and we can move on to the next item.
Well, now, hold on a minute. This is the first chance that we've had to look at your items. Plus, you haven't even seen our bargaining issues yet.
This is dues checkoff. It's our #1 priority. It's just standard language in all of our contracts.
Listen, we're not too interested in collecting your dues for you. We're not a bank.
Well, maybe we can make a trade for it. Maybe give up a holiday, possibly, or hold back on a wage increase. Then you give us dues checkoff.
Look, it's going to take a while to sort out all these issues, so I suggest that you just move on to some of the other items in your list. You know, it's a little too early to be signing off on anything.
Okay, we're definitely going to come back to this later. The next item on our list is one we got to have. It's post-retirement health.
The National Labor Relations Act holds managers and supervisors to a higher standard than other employees. If a union election ever happened at your location, you would not be able to vote, only the hourly employees. So how they see you and the job you're doing can have a huge impact on how things turn out. A big part of your job is dealing with people and taking care of your employees. You make decisions regarding their work and benefits, including training, promotions, discipline, and even possibly their termination. Be aware that these are all things unions like to focus on as issues that they can come in and control. Unions like to make things very personal, often taking what might be a good business decision for your operation and twisting it into an overwhelming issue that causes employees to practically revolt against your management. Never underestimate anything you do, because a clever organizer can use it against you. We're not saying this to scare you, but to make you aware that this is a very serious matter. Union contracts aren't written with efficiency and cooperation in mind. They tend to put a whole new set of rules and regulations in place that does nothing to help you manage. And because change is a four-letter word to unions, anything you try to improve your store and work environment could meet stiff resistance. In a typical unionized environment, what were once simple management decisions can become very difficult because of the union contract. The contract might prohibit supervisors from helping with any type of work done by employees in the union bargaining unit. Or promotions and discipline issues now involve a union steward who may have an agenda of their own. Instead of qualifications, things like seniority may now become more important. Now let's see how having a union contract could alter the way you do things currently in a union-free environment. Again, in this situation, imagine that the union represents the Lowe's employees.
Well, thanks for coming in. As you know, we need to talk about the vacancy in your department and who's the best person to fill it. And I've asked Tom to sit in since he's the union steward now.
Oh, well, I think Jim has done the best job of anyone, and he'd make a good choice.
Hold on now. I have the seniority list right here, and it says that Andy's number one. Now, Jim's way down the list here.
Well, yeah, but Andy isn't really the leader that Jim is.
Well, is Andy a bad employee?
No, he does all right, but
Okay,
Jim...
well, then is he a discipline problem?
No, not really, although his attendance could be better.
I see. Well, does he have any warnings for bad attendance?
No, but Jim is a better worker, and...
Well, I'm sorry, but you know, the contract the company signed clearly states that we go by seniority, which makes Andy the only choice. So if you folks will excuse me, I'm off to give Andy the good news.
So what kind of signs might alert you that union activity is taking place? While some are pretty obvious, many signs are very subtle and may just be the tip of the iceberg. Keep an eye out for things that might not appear too threatening on the surface, like new employee leaders, especially among marginal workers. Employees stop talking when managers approach. Things get too quiet. You get an increase in overall employee complaints. Employment applications dramatically go up or even down. Unusual groups of employees start getting together. Employees start asking for other employees' addresses and personal information. And former employees are hanging out with current ones. Then there are more obvious warning signs, such as rumors of union activity, or even open talk of getting a union. Union literature or handouts start appearing. Union authorization cards are being passed around. The sudden use of new terminology favored by unions, such as dignity and respect, grievance procedure, or collective bargaining. Attitude changes in employees. And of course, the ongoing appearance of strangers talking to employees in the store, the parking lot, or even going to employees' homes. And don't discount that union activity down the road at another company could spill over into your location. If they get rejected somewhere else, they might go looking for what they see as a better target. Or if they win an election, the union may want to continue to spread its influence. Remember that where there is smoke, there is usually fire, and that definitely applies to unions in the workplace. There are three basic categories of union activity you need to be on the lookout for. While different on the surface, they should all be treated as dangerous situations. The first level of activity is designed to distract customers and encourage them not to shop at Lowe's. While not usually an attempt to organize employees, this can severely hurt business and your overall operation. This activity can involve pickets outside the store, handbills, demonstrations, and negative publicity driven by the union. An example is when unions protest the use of non-union labor to build a new store. The second type of union activity is when employees are merely exhibiting interest in a union, or perhaps a union is making the initial steps to target a particular location. You may see professional organizers or literature appearing, hear vague questions about unions, and maybe even discover union cards are showing up. The third kind of union activity is the full-blown organizing campaign, where there is no doubt you have a union trying to get into your facility. This could very well lead up to an actual election and may be your last chance to head things off before that happens. At this point, you've got cards being signed, both in-house and paid organizers to deal with, and union meetings being held for interested employees. But no matter what stage you think you have, the most important thing to remember is that you cannot fight it alone. And don't be surprised or embarrassed at how far along a union campaign might be without your knowledge. Again, keep in mind that unions are very good at staying below management's radar screen until they're ready to be seen. Now, as a manager, you know that your everyday performance is important to the success of our company. However, during union activity, it jumps up another notch, and it becomes absolutely critical that you're alert at all times. Remember that you speak and act on behalf of Lowe's, meaning the company is bound by and can be held responsible for your actions and statements. Therefore, it's vital that you know what you can and cannot say and do during union activity. If an employee approaches you with a question about unions, always thank them for coming to you and asking questions. Keep in mind that you want to do your best to maintain a good dialogue with employees at all times, especially during union activity. This is because as things progress, you may find fewer opportunities to get your message across without it being influenced by an organizer. Next, you need to state Lowe's position on unions. Tell them that Lowe's is strongly opposed to unions at our locations, but we are not anti-union, rather pro-employee. We prefer our open door policy as a means of direct and open communication instead of dealing with an outside third party. We already have the policies, practices, and personnel in place to help resolve problems. Then, make sure to give the employee accurate information about their question. If you don't know the answer, tell them that, but let them know you will find out and get back to them quickly. Make sure you do follow up as soon as you can, or you risk alienating that employee and making them wonder if you really can be trusted. And finally, as we already discussed, make sure to pass along the conversation to the appropriate Lowe's management. You have an obligation to report any union activity immediately, just as you would any incidents of sexual harassment or inappropriate workplace conduct.
Well, I don't know what to think. I wish we could talk to Mark about it.
Oh, here he comes.
Good. Let's see what he thinks of all this.
Hey, Mark, got a minute?
Sure, what's up?
I don't know if you heard about it, but some of the people in our area have been thinking about getting a union in here.
They said that you didn't really care one way or another. Is that true?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm glad you asked about it, because I do care. And the bottom line is that Lowe's feels that unions aren't in our best interests, and that we can work better without a third party getting in the middle of things. We just think that they aren't needed here. I mean, we've got an open door policy, we've got other procedures already in place to deal with problems that might come up, so I agree with that 100%.
Well, they say that a union will make things better.
Well, all I know is that I'd rather deal directly with everyone, like we're doing right now. A union could get in the way of that. And listen, if you have any other questions, just let me know and I'll try to help with them.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for talking to us.
No problem. Oh, that was something new. Well, I better get on the phone and let HR know about this.
A helpful way to remember some of the do's and don'ts of dealing with union activity is to follow the TIPS rule, T-I-P-S. Each letter should remind you of conduct to avoid, especially during an organizing drive. We'll also take a look at some situations that might come up that involve the use of tips. We'll see a manager mishandle things the first time out, and then a version that follows the rules correctly. The first letter, T, stands for threaten. Managers and supervisors cannot threaten employees by telling them they will suffer if they support or vote for a union. Some specific examples of what you cannot threaten because of their union allegiance are that you won't deal with the union if it gets in, that Lowe's will close the location, that you'll transfer union supporters, or fire or lay off employees, that employees will have a loss of wages or benefits because a union is voted in. Don't threaten reduced hours, or a cutback in overtime. And you can't have an environment designed to pressure pro-union employees into quitting. And you can't make undesirable work assignments.
Listen, I know what you've told us about the union, but I just think that voting them in would help make things better around here.
Hey, if you know what's good for you, you forget that union garbage and stick with a company. I know who's supporting the union, and they'll be sorry if they're not careful.
That's definitely not the way to react. Threatening an employee isn't just wrong. It can destroy trust you've worked hard to build. Let's try again and see what's different this time.
Listen, I know what you've told us about the union, but I just think that voting them in would help make things better around here.
Well, like I said before, that's your right and it's your choice. But I hope you keep an open mind. You don't need to pay someone your hard-earned money who doesn't really know our jobs to speak for you. Just add it all up and I think you'll agree you're better off without a union.
The second letter, I, stands for interrogate. Management cannot interrogate employees about their feelings about the union or about union activity going on. Treat everyone the same and don't ask even your most trusted supporters anything different from a known union sympathizer. Examples of what you cannot ask an employee are where they stand on the union issue, how they will vote in an election, if they signed a union authorization card, if they or others are going to union meetings, what they think of the union organizers, whether they ever belong to a union, even during a hiring interview, and do not visit employees' homes to talk about the union. Keep in mind that if employees ask you questions about the union, you can answer them truthfully, but you cannot ask them any questions in return about union activity or their part in it. Instead, you should simply listen as the best method of gaining information about what's going on. Some of the best information you can get about the union, its strategy, tactics, and the progress of the campaign, will come voluntarily from employees. By showing them that you are honest and trustworthy over time, they will be more likely to confide in you.
Hey, one of those union organizers came by the house last night trying to get me to sign a union card. You know much about those?
Yeah, I know about them. Did you sign a union card? That's not a smart move.
Well, the manager is concerned, as they should be. But that's not the way to go about it, since asking how someone feels about the union is prohibited.
Hey, one of those union organizers came by the house last night trying to get me to sign a union card. You know much about those?
I know that those union cards are a lot more than they seem. It's basically a legal document that gives you a right to speak for yourself to the union. They would represent you at the bargaining table, and what they get is what you would get, good or bad.
I knew it was too good to be true. That organizer sure was putting a lot of pressure on me to sign up.
Well, just be careful. There's a lot more to being in a union than meets the eye.
Well, thanks. I'll keep that in mind.
The third part of TIPS is P, which stands for promise. It's easy to get caught up in a campaign and want to reward employees for their support or information, but be aware that that is unacceptable. You cannot promise employees any specific benefit for supporting the company or voting against the union. Some examples of what you cannot promise are promotions for company supporters, to correct problems before the election if employees vote against the union, favoritism or special treatment for pro-company employees, predictions of what might happen if the union gets in or not, new policies or procedures that don't exist currently, or any changes in wages, benefits, or other terms of employment.
So if the union gets enough of these cards signed up and there is an election, will anyone know how I vote?
Oh, yeah, of course. That's easy to figure out. But if you vote for us, I'll make sure you get a little something extra in your next paycheck, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Again, the manager is letting their enthusiasm get the best of them and has stepped over the line. Let's try it again with a bit more restraint.
So, if the union gets enough of these cards signed and the election is scheduled, will anyone know how I vote?
No. All NLRB elections are done by secret ballot. No one will know how you vote unless you tell them.
But that organizer said if I signed the card, I'd have to vote for the union.
That's not true. Even if you signed a card and there's an election, you can still vote no. It's your decision. Just take a look at all the facts and don't let anyone pressure you.
The last part of TIPS is S, which stands for spy. Basically, you cannot take part in any kind of surveillance of union activities, no matter where it occurs. This means spying on both employees and union organizers. And don't even give the impression you're trying to find out what's going on, and don't appear to be eavesdropping on employees. Creating the impression of surveillance is just as prohibited as actually doing it. Here's a list of things you should not do. Do not attend union meetings, even if invited. Do not tell anyone you heard them talking about the union. Do not tell anyone you know their role in the union campaign. Do not ask for union literature from employees. However, if they offer it to you, you can take it. Do not ask who is attending union meetings. Do not interfere with employees soliciting other employees about the union during their breaks or free time, as long as it doesn't interfere with work. Do not follow employees or union representatives after work.
Hey, Vince, that union meeting's tonight. I was thinking of going to see what they had to say.
Really? Why don't you make a list of who shows up and tell me tomorrow? I'd really appreciate it.
Now, that's definitely not the right way to handle that situation, as it crosses the line when the manager asks someone to spy for them. Let's give it another try.
Hey, Vince, you know there's that union meeting tonight? I was thinking of going to see what they had to say.
Well, if you go, compare what they say with the facts we've given you about the union. You'll probably hear a lot of promises and things that sound real good, but just remember, there aren't any guarantees with a union.
Remember the TIPS rule at all times. Threaten, interrogate, promise, and spy. Violation of any of these rules could result in charges against the company by the NLRB and could lead to serious consequences. If you even suspect or think you might be crossing the line, don't do it, because you can be sure the union and its supporters are watching you, just waiting for you to make a mistake. Okay, so it sounds like your hands are tied with all these limits placed on you. Well, don't get frustrated, because there are plenty of things you can do legally to get across the company message. A good method to remember what's acceptable is to think of the enemy as your foe. F-O-E stands for facts, opinions, and examples. Follow this rule and you'll do fine. First of all, the F is for facts. Stick to the facts about unions and what they're all about. Some facts you can tell them about are union decline and membership losses, union finances and where the money goes, stories or articles about unions including strikes and corruption, how the voting procedure works and that it's a secret ballot. They can vote against a union even if they signed an authorization card, how collective bargaining works, or review the list of benefits they currently enjoy.
And the union's telling us that we'll get a raise, and they'll add another holiday, and we'll get more vacation too.
Oh, come on. You actually going to believe that bunch of liars? You mark my words, if you support the union, you're going to have a lot less after we get done with you.
Well, that's a pretty risky way to talk to the employee. Here's a much better way to handle the situation.
And the union's telling us that we'll get a raise, and they'll add another holiday, and we'll get more vacation too.
Well, if the union won, all that would be decided in collective bargaining. Like we've said, the company doesn't have to agree to anything that isn't in its best interest. And if they get a contract, the NLRB has stated that while you might gain some things or even stay where you're at now, you could actually end up with less.
Less?
Mm-hmm.
That's not what the union told us.
Well, it's true. I've got some articles you might like to see about it. They're about unions that agreed to concessions in their contracts. I'll bring them by later for you to look at.
Yeah, that might be a good idea. I'd like to see what that's all about.
Okay.
The second part of FO is O, which stands for opinions. You're free to tell employees where you stand on the union issue and what you personally think of it. You can tell them that you're not neutral on the issue. You don't think a union is in their best interest. You would rather work with them directly instead of through an outsider. You feel a union would not be good for maintaining a competitive advantage. You hope they'll vote against the union.
You know, all this union talk is so confusing. What do you think would happen if they came?
Oh, well, it doesn't really matter to me. If they got an election, I couldn't vote anyway, so who cares?
Now that's an attitude managers should stay away from. If a union did get in, life as you know it would change dramatically, and not for the better.
You know, all of this union talk is so confusing. What do you think would happen if they came in?
Well, in my opinion, we'd lose a lot of our flexibility in dealing with things if the union came in. I mean, we all get along pretty good, and hopefully people feel like they can come to me about anything.
Yeah.
But we really couldn't talk about work issues without a union steward sitting in.
Oh, yeah? But I like being able to come and talk to you when I need to.
Well, I'm afraid that would change with the union. And I don't really think the employees will benefit. And I'd feel like I failed you if you thought you needed to pay someone else to talk for you.
The last part of FOE is E, which stands for examples. A great way to prove your point to employees on both sides of the fence is to back it up with concrete examples of how a union will not help them. Some things you can use as examples are union contracts with specific clauses that don't benefit employees, like checkoff. Contracts with concessions or cuts in wages and benefits. Sections from the union constitution that members have to live by. Direct comparisons of wages and benefits between Lowe's and unionized companies. Past union experiences you've had or know about. Closings or layoffs by unionized companies. And what has happened to union members who went on strike, such as loss of wages, insurance, or being replaced.
The union told me if they get in, they could force Lowe's into giving them what they want and bargain.
And you believed that? Look, Lowe's isn't going to just roll over and cave in. Trust me on that.
Basically, the manager is right that Lowe's won't just give in, but that's not the best way to point that out. Give the employee an example to think about.
The union told me if they came in, they could force Lowe's into giving them what they want and bargain.
Well, I've seen what can happen when a union tries to force a company to give in. My dad was in the Steelworkers Union.
Your dad was in the union?
Yeah, and his union went out on strike more than once. While he was on a picket line, he lost his paycheck. We had to cover his insurance premiums. And the last time, he ended up getting replaced.
Wow, that's rough.
Yeah, and I can tell you from first-hand experience that what they got wasn't worth the pain.
While these rules make good sense and can keep you out of trouble, let's take a minute to talk about the consequences of not following them in a union campaign. Any attempt to interfere with an employee's right to make their own free choice about unionization is grounds for an unfair labor practice charge, or ULP. A ULP is any violation of an employee's rights under the National Labor Relations Act. This applies to both the employer and the union. It could be a threat, bribe, or other form of coercion, and covers the various things we talked about in the TIPS rule of what not to do. Sometimes a union will file ULP charges against a company, and depending on how the NLRB rules, an election could be blocked or postponed, and the company punished. In some cases, a union has been appointed as the employee's representative without even holding the election. Unions can also have ULP charges filed against them for such things as harassing employees who won't support them, or refusing to properly represent them in grievances if they do win an election. If you follow the TIPS and FOE rules, you'll be able to stay out of trouble and still get your point across. There are obvious disadvantages to employees if they vote in a union, and it's your job to pass along that information. Just be factual and honest, enforce rules without prejudice, and tell employees that while you hope they vote against the union, the final choice is up to them to decide. Keep in mind that a vote for the union by an employee is a vote to kick you out. In union campaigns, you'll find that employees don't necessarily vote for a union, they vote against their management. That's a lot to absorb about dealing with unions. Try to use common sense and confer with human resources if you run into any problems. Your job is to help your employees wade through the mountain of misinformation being thrown at them by the union. By knowing the limits and rules, you can effectively communicate Lowe's philosophy on labor unions. Your efforts will ensure that we continue to take care of our employees without the interference of an outside third party. Our best defense against unions is an environment of positive employee relations where all our people are treated with dignity and respect. Put your employees in a position where they find no need or desire to join a union, and you're ahead of the game.
As a manager or supervisor for Lowe's, you probably realize that your employees view you as the company. You are their official source of information on two main areas: how things are going in the business and how they are performing in their job. So you play a vital role in the overall success of your operation and the people that staff it. In this part of the program, we're going to look at your role as a manager from a different perspective than you're used to, one that is often overlooked. We're going to look at a manager's job at Lowe's through the eyes of your employees. After all, they are the ones who really make things happen. Without them, you'd be in charge of a huge inventory with no one to help market it. We'll take a closer look at what employees are looking for in a job and what they expect of you as their leader. Managing employees is not easy. It takes training, intelligence, and time. But most of all, it requires common sense. Each employee you deal with has a distinct personality, meaning the way they react to things can vary greatly from person to person. Recognize that your employees are people first and workers second. Just like you, they have specific needs, both on and off the job, if they are to be productive, well-adjusted people. At Lowe's, we believe in the golden rule as a strong foundation for dealing with people. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you translates into taking every opportunity to say and do the things that make an employee feel bigger, better, and more important. But you must be sincere about it and not say things just to flatter them, or you risk turning them off and shutting down a line of communication. As we've talked about before, an important part of your job is dealing with a threat just as big as our competition. That is, the threat of a labor union coming into your operation. We've already gone over some of the basics of understanding unions and how they go about organizing a company. Now, let's talk about how the way you manage your employees mixes with the potential for a union organizing campaign at your store. This is an important issue to review because there is a very strong relationship between good management and remaining union-free. In most cases, the odds of a union getting into your location can be directly traced to personnel practices and supervision. Obviously, if there are good practices and supervision in place, then the chances are high that you will be able to remain union-free. However, bad practices in management may lead employees to contact a union. Because of this, it is vital that managers at Lowe's develop and then maintain a good employer-employee relationship. During an organizing campaign in the workplace, you will find that employee sympathy towards a union can be summed up in two ways. A union supporter is usually either pro-union or anti-management. There are big differences in the two and what that means in a campaign, but they have in common the fact that good management can help keep either from developing. Pro-union employees tend to believe that a union is the best way for them to achieve their needs and wants at work, such as getting higher wages, better benefits, job security, and more respect. These people can be fairly even-tempered and logical, but just feel that a union is a better option than what is currently offered. Often, pro-union employees are reaching out to the union as a way to get management's attention because they feel they have been neglected somehow. The best way to chip away at these feelings is to remind them of what they already have, and that a union is no guarantee that things will magically get better. These employees react more to factual information presented in a calm manner.
Well, I gotta tell you, I really think that a union in here would make things better. I know you don't think so, but it just seems like the way to go.
Well, on the surface, it might appear that way, but you have to take a deeper look at what they can guarantee. I mean, you've already got some great things here at Lowe's without a union. And remember those union contracts that we showed everyone in the last meeting?
You mean the ones with the wage freezes and the lost holidays?
Exactly. And those companies are right here in town. And it's the same union local that wants to get in here. Now just keep in mind that if they do get in, there's no guarantees of what might happen in collective bargaining.
Well, I have been listening to what you're saying, and I'll have to admit that there are some things about this union that make me kind of nervous.
All I'm saying is try to keep an open mind about it, okay? And if you have any more questions, I'm happy to answer them for you.
The other main reason an employee supports a union is because they're anti-management. Something has triggered anger or mistrust, and they see the union as a way to get even with management and the company. In many cases, these employees are troublemakers or known as complainers by their fellow employees. They seem to have a chip on their shoulder, and they're looking to make management feel their pain. Anti-management workers can also be a bad influence on other employees and can infect a workplace if ignored. Emotions run high, and they like to see themselves as crusading against an evil cause. Be wary of these folks, because they can be very difficult to reason with and tend to be irrational in their decision-making.
Yeah, I know, Kenny, but seriously, if you know what's good for you, you'll support the union. I mean, we're going to show these managers who really runs this place.
All I've heard is a lot of talk. What exactly is the union going to do for me?
Okay, for starters, we'll get rid of those stupid attendance rules. Man, nobody likes those.
You're the only one that doesn't like those rules. Why can't you just get here on time like the rest of us?
No, Kenny. Look, management just has it in for me. Man, they would like nothing better than to run me right out the door of this place. Yeah, but you just let them try it now. The union will slap an unfair labor practice charge on them so fast their heads will spin.
There are some common types of employees that unions know they can best appeal to and get involved in their efforts. Now is a good time to identify those people, because you can get a head start in working to keep them on the company side. These people aren't necessarily bad employees. They can have good work habits and traits, but may be more easily influenced by a union. Watch out for employees that tend to be independent. These employees like to operate on their own with minimal interference and direction. They might see the union as a way to block change and insulate them from the company. Cause-oriented. The quest of making things right in their mind gives them satisfaction in knowing that all is well in the world. Overly qualified. People that think they're better than the job they're assigned to and often look for ways to make their own imprint on things. Anti-establishment. They are against practically everything and anything and see managers as big brother enforcing a set of unfair rules from a corrupt organization. Inefficient and low producers. They see a union as a way to get protection from managers who might threaten their job security because of a lack of good work habits. Something-for-nothing employees. These people want to find a way to work the system and get more for less. And the chronically dissatisfied. No matter what, these people are never happy. They always see that the grass is greener somewhere else. Okay, so given all these different employees, how do you get a grip on dealing with them? Not to mention your other employees who are good performers and do their jobs without worry. One of the best defenses against the growth of union support in your workplace is morale. Take stock of how people are thinking and acting. Morale is an attitude in people that reflects their feelings about their job and management. And it is something that cannot be bought, ordered, reasoned, persuaded, or coerced from an employee. It must be created by management. Here are a few ways that you can influence positive morale. These should be looked at as proactive, ongoing elements of management, and not something you pull out and try only when you run into problems. Maintain a feeling of security. People want to feel safe and secure at home and on the job. They don't like surprises that come from out of nowhere. Do all you can to let them know you're watching out for them. Show your appreciation for their work and their efforts. When they know their performance results in a thank you and acknowledgement from their boss, it makes things go easier. Let them know you're glad they're a part of the team and you value their efforts. Make sure to allow for self-expression in their work. People are different and look for ways to demonstrate that. Don't get too caught up in making a mold and applying it to everyone. After all, they might have some great ideas you never even thought of. You need to work on developing respect as a manager. Respect is something that is earned over time and not just handed down because of your position. Be fair, consistent, and exhibit integrity in everything you do. Apply policies equally and treat employees fairly with no favoritism. And don't get respect confused with being liked. Respect is much more important and will always get you farther with employees. Always give recognition for contributions employees make. Let them know you like what they did and point it out to them. People like it when they are rewarded for something they've done. It's human nature to want recognition for your efforts. This applies to even the smallest contribution, because that can lead to bigger ones if they feel it's worth the effort. Encourage initiative among your employees. If they always wait for you to tell them exactly what to do, productivity and efficiency will suffer. And because they're the ones actually on the floor performing the task, they probably have a good idea of what it takes to do it right, and maybe even better. Don't be afraid to give them some flexibility and see where they can go. And work hard to establish credibility for both yourself and the company. This goes hand in hand with being respected. If you have a good reputation and are known as a source for good, honest information, then employees will trust you and follow your direction. It's much harder to undermine a manager if employees know that they are reliable and on their side. And if they feel they have a good company to work for and are taken care of, then there is less reason to go looking for an alternative. A detailed study by a group of psychologists on 10,000 employees and 1,000 supervisors came up with some interesting results related to job performance. Take a look at this list of 10 job factors that employees were asked to rank in order of importance. Think you have a good idea of how an employee would rate them? Well, you may be surprised, because managers came up with a completely different order when asked what they thought was most important to employees. That is important to keep in mind, because if you manage based on false assumptions, you'll never be on the same page. The number one priority on the employees list was appreciation of work. We've touched on that as a good way to instill positive morale. But now we see that it is the single most important issue to employee satisfaction. However, supervisors picked money as what they thought would be the most important job factor for employees. That's not found on the employees list until number 5. So you can see that supervisors didn't really have a good handle on what makes their employees tick. Make sure your people know when they've done a good job and that you noticed.
Okay, I just wanted to let all of you know that we're getting a lot of good comments lately from customers. They're saying that our employees are being really helpful, really friendly. That is a great thing to hear. I really appreciate all the extra effort you guys are putting into the job, and I just want to thank you.
Continuing down the list, number 2 for employees is feeling included in what's going on. Again, the supervisors got it wrong when they thought employees would have picked security on the job as the second item. Supervisors ranked feeling in on things at the bottom of the list, so make sure you recognize the true importance of this factor. If employees don't feel they have a clue what is going on around them, they're more likely to look to someone who promises to pay attention to them. A big union sales pitch is that they will give employees a voice. Don't give employees an excuse to fall for that line.
And in addition to the good comments we're hearing, we've also increased our overall store-wide sales by 12% over last month. I know that hard work you're doing is really paying off. And with a big sale coming up this weekend, we should show even better numbers.
Sounds good.
Employees usually want to contribute to the success of a company. If you leave them out of the loop, they might lose that drive. Tell them what's going on and don't beat around the bush. Be direct and upfront. Don't be afraid to give the bad news along with the good, because they'll hear it sooner or later, and you may not be able to control it at that point.
But that big sale means a lot more customers in the store, so I'm going to need full coverage this weekend. Now, I know that some of you have some things going on, but it's important that everyone is here, okay?
Third on the list is help with personal problems. That usually surprises most managers because they think employees don't want them interfering in their personal lives. But there is a big difference between interfering and showing concern. Let employees know you are someone they can come to about issues that are bothering them, both on and off the job. Show them you're more than just their boss, that you can empathize with their situation and hopefully be of assistance. When employees realize that what is important to them is important to you, it's a win-win situation for everyone.
By the way, how's your husband doing? Is he out of the hospital yet?
No, he's coming home tomorrow. Turns out he won't need surgery after all. Doctor told him to just stay off his feet for a few days, and things should be fine.
Oh, that is great. Oh, listen, if you have any questions about what the insurance will cover from all that, just let me know. I talked to HR, and they told me how all of that works.
Thanks. I'll come by after my shift if that's okay. I really appreciate your help with this. Things haven't been easy at home lately.
Follow the rest of the employees list down and you'll see that security is number 4, followed by wages, interesting work, promotion opportunities, personal loyalty, working conditions, and tactful discipline. This doesn't mean you have to change everything about how you relate to your employees to match their desires, but it does point out the importance of being in tune to what they are thinking. Let's shift gears now a bit and explore some of the reasons why employees often turn to unions. We've touched on good habits to get into, but now we're going to see what types of practices can actually drive employees in the wrong direction. Keep in mind that you don't actually have to hear the "you" word from employees for there to be a connection. There are hundreds of reasons you might find yourself in a union campaign, but here are some of the most common. An unfair workload, heavy-handed discipline. No one will listen to them. Wages and benefits are not competitive. Supply shortages and equipment failures. Unfair or inconsistent management. Management won't give answers. And a lack of overall communication. Let's take a closer look at these issues and see if you recognize any of them as being a problem in your workplace. An unfair workload may mean one thing to an employee and quite another to the manager, but pay attention to any complaints you might get. Employees are hired to do a specific share of a particular job, and for the most part, they follow through willingly. But in the frenzy that can build up running a store, an unequal distribution of work can easily take place. That might mean working an extra shift, covering for someone who might be out, assigning more than can be reasonably done, or shifts that are understaffed.
Hey, Patrick, thanks for covering for Steve while he was on vacation. I know you could have used some help.
Yeah, it was a busy week.
And I know you've got that family reunion coming up this weekend, even though you're scheduled to work. So I've asked Franklin over in lighting, and he said he could probably loan us someone to cover for you if you want to take Saturday off.
Really? Wow, that'd be great. Thanks.
But it doesn't always mean too much to do. An unfair workload can also mean not enough work. People with time on their hands might get bored and restless. Plus, it can create problems as others might see them as being lazy or getting special treatment. Unions love unfair workloads because they have a solution for every situation. Too many hours? The union promises to stop it. Not enough hours? The union promises to get more. Make sure you take the time to assess your shifts, assignments, and schedules to ensure even workloads. Heavy-handed discipline can create big headaches. Of course, discipline is a necessary part of the manager's job, but don't let it get too excessive. Not only do you irritate the employee being disciplined, you may risk setting that person up as a martyr for other employees to rally around. Discipline should be viewed as a positive method of guiding and teaching workers, rather than just inflicting a penalty. If they don't learn from the experience, but instead become bitter and angry, you've created a worse situation than you started with. There is no greater time to be consistent than when you are disciplining someone. Every situation appears to be unique, but the punishment must be handed down in a consistent and fair manner. Analyze the incident and hand down a fair punishment for the infraction. If not, your employees will cry favoritism and your credibility will suffer. When you discipline, do so with passion. Let the employee know you are very concerned with what has happened and you care about how it works out. Make sure to deal with facts and don't be influenced by rumors or reputations. Zero in on their overall job performance and factor that into the situation.
Yeah.
Hey, you wanted to see me?
Yeah, thanks for coming. We need to talk about your tardiness the last few days. I really need your help figuring this out. Anything I should know about?
Yeah, actually there is. My wife got a new job and can't wait with the kids for the school bus anymore, so I've had to hang around and make sure they don't miss it.
Well, we should be able to work something out with that. But I'm afraid we're going to have to deal with your tardiness this week. You know, the attendance policy says you should be up to a written warning by now.
Yeah, I know, but I guess that's fair. I gotta admit, it's my fault. I should have come to you sooner.
Talk to them in private and let them know this is a confidential discussion. No one wants to find out you ran around talking about them. And above all, always deal with them in a calm manner by removing any anger or emotion you might have built up. Employees should never be berated or yelled at, especially in front of their peers or customers. It not only embarrasses them and makes you their enemy, it damages your image often beyond repair. Unions love to find instances of discipline gone bad. You often discover the offending employee is now a solid union supporter. Their story takes on a life of its own, usually embellished to make the manager into an evil tyrant, and the employee becomes cast as the poor, innocent, and hard-working person who was denied a fair chance. And don't be surprised if they claim it was all done to punish the employee for being a union supporter. Employees can often feel like no one is listening to them. This can easily occur since you aren't just managing one person at a time. This doesn't mean you need to spend your whole day as a sounding board for employees, but try to be available and open to them. The open door policy means just that. Lowe's wants employees to be able to voice their concerns, so don't shut them out. When you talk with employees, be a good listener. Don't interrupt them until they're ready for a response. If you don't let them finish their thought, they'll feel like you really aren't concerned and are just there because you have to be. Take notes if you need to, so you can refer to them later if you have any questions. Always give them an answer right then if you can. If you can't at that time, tell them that you'll find out and get back to them. But get back to them quickly. Follow the sundown rule, which means you'll follow up by the time the sun goes down that same day. Obviously, for later shifts, that means by the next business day. Either give them the answer then, or tell them you're still working on it.
Hey, Bart, you got a minute?
Yeah, what's up, Dexter?
I want to ask you about this new job posting over in Payne.
Well, you're interested in that job. You know, the posting's only going to be up there for one more day, so make sure you get your name on the list.
Okay. You know I used to work summers on this Payne crew, and I think I fit in pretty well. How do I apply for it?
Well, follow me. I'm on my way to my office now anyway. I'll run you through the process, and I'll help you out with the paperwork. You know, having that experience might give you a good shot at the job.
Sounds good. Either way.
Okay.
Again, unions like to say they'll give employees a voice to the company that they don't currently have. They promise to get management's attention and make them listen. In the long run, unions have their own agenda they will operate by. But it sounds real good to an employee that can't seem to find a manager who will give them the time of day. Wages and benefits are a big reason your employees signed up with Lowe's. We offer very competitive packages for our industry and are constantly working to offer improvements. However, no one really ever feels they're getting all that they deserve. It's just human nature to want more. What can happen is that a wage increase might not be what they expected, or maybe a benefit changes, but employees perceive it as being worse. However, you'll find that when wages and benefits become an issue for employees, it is usually the sign of bigger problems. Because they knew what they were getting when they first started, most employees are okay with what they have. But if they just keep complaining, you probably have a larger issue driving things. It could be problems with management or not being comfortable where things are heading. But you need to dig deeper to uncover what exactly is behind the unrest.
Well, Mark, the thing is, I just don't really think I'm being paid what I'm worth. I mean, man, you know I've got a whole lot of background in construction, and I'm just not getting nearly enough money for what I'm doing.
I'm real sorry that you feel that way. I mean, we try to be upfront with everybody from the start about how much we're going to pay them and how much they can expect to make.
Well, just isn't fair.
Tom, listen, you do a good job. You do great work. Just keep at it, and our system will work for you, too.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. You know, I'm starting to think that you guys have it in for me.
Now, wait a second. I try to be fair and consistent with everyone, Tom. I mean, what is it that makes you think we're all out to get you?
Typical union campaigns have some kind of wage and benefit issue, such as the union promising to increase wages or offer new and better benefits. But that usually isn't the root cause of the organizing drive and is more of a minor issue to be concerned with. And while the union itself knows that collective bargaining is no guarantee of getting more, the typical employee doesn't really know how that works and hopes the union will come through for them. Supply and inventory shortages and equipment failures are fairly easy to spot, but not always easy to remedy. However, all the employee knows is that they can't do their job at that very moment, and that's bad for them. They're not really concerned with how a manager is going to fix things. They just want it done yesterday. The first step is to make sure supplies and inventory are properly stocked and that equipment is working well. Be proactive and plan for problems so you know how to quickly resolve them when they do come up. Get on it right away and let your employees know immediately what is being done to correct the problem, and then make it happen. Also, acknowledge their efforts in getting things back on track.
Hey, Mark. This is the second time this week this saw's been out of order. It's really messing me up.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it, because I did put a call into the repair guy, and he said he'd be here by 3 today.
Great. I hate to keep telling people the saw's out of order.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Well, this time we'll make sure it's fixed right.
Super.
While a union can't do anything themselves to stop supply and equipment problems, be aware that they will use the situation as an example of management not caring about working conditions. They might use it as a safety issue and have been known to call in government agencies like OSHA to investigate. What may be a small issue can grow into a huge nightmare that takes even more time and money to deal with, if not addressed properly right up front. Unfair or inconsistent management almost always leads to trouble. Employees tend to analyze every move you make, and they like to keep a mental scoreboard of how things are handled. There should be no great mystery about how to deal with employees. Ask yourself, would I take the same action with my best and worst employee? If the answer is no, you need to reevaluate what you're doing. Create an atmosphere where no one is in fear of your next move because they know you're fair to everyone.
Okay, guys, we've had some complaints lately that we let some people take time off last month, but now we're not doing it this month. Now, you know that things get busier at different times of the year. We're in a peak period right now, so it's not as easy to accommodate your requests. It's nothing personal, but we need everyone here right now. And then when things slow down again, we'll be better able to address time off. Okay?
Another management issue to be careful of is the feeling that employees can't ever get answers to their questions. This is similar to them thinking no one is listening. Most employees realize they can't have everything they ask for, but whenever reasonable requests are made, make every effort to respond. Don't give them the impression that you're ignoring them or don't have time for them. And if you have to tell them no, don't just leave them hanging. Tell them why. Don't sugarcoat it, but be honest and you'll score points for telling the truth. This relates directly to employees wanting to feel included on what's going on. They have a natural curiosity, and it's your job as a manager to fill in the blanks for them. Educated and informed employees are better suited for the role they perform every day.
Okay, some of you had some questions lately about how our 401k plan works. You said you didn't know if it was a good retirement plan or not, so I've asked Bart to come in. He's the expert on that, and he's going to go over it with you this morning.
Okay, I've got some information here I think will clear things up, so let me just give this out to you and we can go over the plans. Here we go, one for everybody.
A study by the International Association of Business Communicators surveyed employees on job-related subjects they want to know about. The top-rated answer was organizational plans for the future. The second was productivity improvement. They may not show it on the surface, but employees do have an interest in more to do with their job than you might expect. Poor management techniques can lead to disastrous consequences where a union is concerned. Whether employees feel you're not listening to them, not keeping them informed, or just treating them badly, you become a liability in their eyes, and a union can provide a shoulder for them to cry on. Unions will tell your employees that they'll get rid of bad supervisors. They'll say they will finally make sure employees get the dignity and respect they deserve. They'll point out that a written union contract has clauses to protect employees and can't be arbitrarily changed by the company. This all sounds great to an employee who feels slighted and gives them a good excuse to support a union. What all these issues boil down to is communication. Even the smallest issue can mushroom in size if communicated poorly. Know the needs of your employees and do your best to keep them up to date with what's going on. A lot of managers think they do a good job of communicating, but the facts show they don't. Another survey by the IABC asked employees, what is your preferred source of company information? The largest number of respondents, over 91%, said they wanted to get their information from their immediate supervisor. But when they were asked, what is your current source of company information, only about 57% said it was their immediate supervisor. So while they want information from their managers, only about half are actually getting it. As you can see, managers need to work harder on communicating to employees. You'll find that open dialogue means better teamwork, and the more accustomed employees get to two-way communication, the more they'll come to you with problems and grievances. And that means they're less likely to go looking for an outside third party, like a union.
Now, guys, I've been getting some feedback that you'd like some more direction on where things are going. So what I want to do is kind of give you some more time in these meetings to ask questions. I get caught up sometimes trying to make sure that things are running smoothly, and then I forget who's actually making the things happen.
So you want us to tell you what's on our mind?
Exactly. I mean, we all need to work on communicating what's going on so that no one feels left out. And this means all sorts of stuff, ideas for improvement, questions about benefits or work, even complaints, you name it.
That's a great idea. You know, my last boss didn't tell us anything. It's a big reason I left.
And if you've got something that needs one-on-one attention, make sure to let me know about that too, okay?
Obviously, there are many more reasons why employees turn to unions, things like a lack of training or advancement potential, poorly defined policies, or perceived lack of job security. You can't be expected to have the perfect work environment, and you aren't expected to have the solution to every problem that comes along. But you are expected to give it your best effort. To recap, let's look at what are known as the 6 sins of supervision. Do your best to avoid them, or your employees might end up looking for a union to represent them. The first sin is trying to be liked rather than respected. Studies show that employees want firm but fair treatment. While they don't like or respect a loosely run operation with no discipline, they don't like favoritism, unfairness, or inconsistency in discipline. Don't go too far in either direction, but be consistent and fair in your decisions. The second sin is failing to ask employees for their input. They perform the job every day and may very well have the answers you're looking for. Ask for their opinion and let them know you appreciate it. The third sin of management is not keeping employees informed. The more they know about the company, the more they feel a part of the overall team. Your credibility among employees will be enhanced as well. Next is not paying attention to employee concerns. This includes any problems, gripes, or complaints they have about the company, their job, fellow workers, and even you. Don't be too defensive about any issue they bring up. See it as an opportunity and not something to be avoided. The farther an employee concern gets without being addressed, the harder it is to resolve. The fifth sin is not giving employees enough constructive feedback and recognition. Every employee wants to know how they are doing, so let them know. And when they do a good job, pat them on the back. Find reasons to praise people when they deserve it, and you'll have employees more motivated and eager to please. The sixth sin often committed by management is failing to set high standards and lead by example. Employees will live up to your expectations and will meet and exceed goals only if their environment is one with high standards, mutual respect, and trust between you and your employees. When they know you back up what you say, they'll follow you anywhere. Okay, so now you're the world's best manager. But how can you take stock of your current situation and see where you might be vulnerable? Let's review a few items to examine. Are your employees comfortable with the open door? Is it really open? Do you follow up with open door issues immediately? Are employees supportive of all members of management? If not, why not? Is there one manager's name that keeps coming up as a problem? Do you hold regular meetings with employees? Have Gallup survey questions been addressed and corrected as needed? Are company policies consistent and fairly enforced? Are there discipline or work issues that employees don't understand? Do you follow job posting guidelines? Are jobs being filled by the best qualified applicant? Do you promote from the hourly ranks? Is there adequate training offered? Is safety an issue? Do you have high absenteeism? Is there a problem with high turnover? And do exit interviews reveal trends for why people leave? As we've discussed, there is a lot to do in your job as a Lowe's manager. It's not always an easy task with some of the distractions you run into. But remember that you can make a big difference in the success of your location. And if you as a manager ever need more information or support, don't hesitate to ask your own supervisor. Take good care of your people and they'll take care of you. Follow these principles every day when you walk in the door and you'll be pleasantly surprised at how smoothly things can run. Make it fun for people to work at Lowe's. Remember that knowledge is power. Share it with those around you. Help your employees have a good self-image. Give them reasons to be proud of you. Make sure the rules are understood by everyone. Radiate enthusiasm in everything you do and everyone you come in contact with. Create opportunities for employees to excel. Appreciate what employees do for the community. And most importantly, honestly care for and about your employees and their welfare. Working with your employees should not be rocket science. Don't make it more complicated than it has to be. Treat people with dignity and respect and be open with them. And remember why we're doing all this in the first place. Number one is that good management is just the right thing to do at all times, no matter what the situation. And second, we don't want to open the door to a third party to come in and get between us and our employees. Don't give employees an excuse for finding an alternative to your management. Remaining union-free is in the best interest of both employees and management at Lowe's. Hopefully, you'll never have to worry about seeing union authorization cards in your facility. And remember, you're not in this alone. Reach out to others in management and your human resources department if you need to. Because in the long run, we're all part of one big team whose main goal is to make Lowe's the leading home improvement retailer in the country.